Welcome back to the Wardrobe of Woe. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing how to improve in Age of Sigmar, and more specifically, the movement phase. I feel the movement phase is oftentimes overlooked in its importance and how it controls the flow of the battle, and how you can manipulate it to be in your favor. Without further ado, let's get started. Understanding the movement capabilities of your army and your opponent's army is critically important in winning a game of Age of Sigmar. Before a game even starts, it's a good idea to ask your opponent what's the fastest unit they have in their army, as well as if they have any deep strike or teleporting units. This can help inform you in your decisions moving forward and how to position your units. Something else to keep track of is a threat range of yours and your opponent's units. Now, what is a threat range? A threat range is how much movement the unit has at base and how much ranged attack they have or the charge distance. So, for example, a Fireslayer Dwarf has a regular move of 4 inches, and then they can charge 2d6. So that means at maximum, they have a 16-inch threat range. Although the further out you get from their base movement, the less likely that they're going to be able to get into combat with you. With ranged units, that's a little bit easier to figure out in that it's either a yes or no if they are in range or not. Their threat range is just their movement plus the range of their bows or other ranged abilities. Additionally, if your army uses Deep Strike, learning how to use Deep Strike and where to put your Deep Striking units is very, very important. Before we move on, learning how to gauge charge distance and deciding if it is worth a command point reroll or if you even want to charge that unit is important as well. This wonderful graphic here, courtesy of Goonhammer, gives you a percentile of rolling a certain number of inches. The key one here is 9 inches, as that is how most teleporting or deep strike works, minus a few exceptions. And so you can see it's about a 28% chance of rolling at least a 9 on 2d6. So keep that in mind when you are trying to make those long charges. To further talk about deep strike, let's expand on what it is. Deep Strike lets you drop your units anywhere on the board as long as they are 9 inches away from every enemy model. This also applies to units that can teleport. A unit that comes to mind is a Tree Revenant. The ability to teleport and Deep Strike your units gives you a ton of tools to affect the flow of the battle, either reinforcing units that are surrounded, trying to target key enemy heroes, or one of my favorite uses of it is to force my opponent to consider my deep strike threats. Make them hold their units back so when they charge into you or when they hit you, it's going to be less powerful because they have to hold some units in reserve to try and catch your deep strike. And that's something else if you are going up against a lot of deep strike is spreading your units out so you have that 9-inch bubble pretty much everywhere you don't want your opponent to be. So behind your army pretty much, and anywhere that they could try and sneak an objective off of you. But having these abilities makes a army much harder to combat because of the movement potential of certain units in the army. So having Deep Strike is a really useful thing to have, but you don't always need it if you don't want to utilize those things. One last thing that I would like to talk about is a concept that I like to call combat blocks, or just blocks for short. Blocks are groupings of units that synergize well and can perform their designated roles autonomously and self-sufficiently from the rest of your army. I think breaking your army up into combat blocks is a great way to make sure your movement is flexible and able to adapt to whatever your opponent does, as well as make it more manageable in how you should approach a objective or the game as a whole. An example of combat blocks would be my personal OBR army, in that I like to have two big units of Mortec and then a Galthazar Harvester or other supporting units behind them, and then my big hero such as Ark in the Black floating between my combat groups, and then I have a grouping of offensive push units such as Stalkers and more Ghasts. This lets me set up my defensive walls and have a spear, so to speak, to go forward and attack or contest objectives. I would like to give thanks to our Patreon supporters and an extra special thanks to Nick Hoff. If you would like to become a Patreon member, there is a link to the Patreon page in the description below. There is also a link to our Discord channel if you want to come and join the community over there. So those were some of my thoughts on how to improve your play in Age of Sigmar pertaining to the movement phase. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or a comment, and if you'd like to see more of this type of content in the future, consider subscribing. This has been in the Wargrove of Will, and I'll see you guys next time.